do everything you possibly can to basically get as much of your awareness into as deep and high and wide a space as you possibly can. And that's ultimately really what it comes down to. I mean, there's so many things that you can clearly do in terms of helping with anything going on in the exterior world, but you really, really do have to tend your own house and fundamentally work on that. The crucial item, as always, is a paradox, and that's fundamentally realizing that there are no others to save, and therefore you vow to do everything you can to save them. And you really do have to see both sides of that. You really fundamentally have to get both sides of that. And it's that paradox of instruction that's always so really extraordinary. On the absolute side of the street, it really is the case, as we were saying, although it's sort of metaphoric, that there is one and only one self. Now again, you have to be careful about that, but it's fundamentally the case. And so that is not the basis of a terribly active social activism, is it? On the other hand, it's absolutely crucial that you get that, and the same goes for ecology, the same goes for any of those things. The only people that are really worthy of working on ecology are those who realize that nothing needs to be done. And therefore you have to work enormously hard. And it's the same through with any of these. There's profoundly realizing the utterly free nature of everything that's arising moment to moment is the only acceptable sort of ground of any of these sorts of action. Because otherwise you're coming from, in a sense, an ultimate insult to spirit, which is you're assuming it doesn't exist. And the same thing is true of your own practice. To assume that you're not enlightened is the ultimate insult to spirit. You presume the non-existence of spirit moment to moment. And under the presumption that spirit doesn't exist, you seek it. So it's the same with political activism. You fundamentally have to realize that things are just fine, radically the way they are. And yet things are truly, truly a nightmare. And balancing both of those, it sounds crazy, but it's a very, very important sort of thing to keep in mind. Because one side or the other, you get in trouble. And you either don't assume spirit is the only reality, and that presumption of no spirit then guides your spiritual actions, that's kind of goofy. On the other hand, there are people that just want to get into activism, and yet are fundamentally not really aware of their own spiritual reality or the reality of what's arising moment to moment, and on the presumption of that ignorance, wish to save the world. So fundamentally what you need to do is, like I said, is understanding the always already liberated nature of everything that's arising, practice. And on the basis of your own practice, take that into the world. And in terms of how that plays out, it plays out if everybody else makes that same assumption. And that's a big assumption. But there's the alternatives to that are to just go insane on a very, very, very short glide path. And in terms of whether we're going to make it or not, but I'm telling you, we are neck to neck, aren't we? If there's just so many things that potentially can blow us away. My favorite is that missing plutonium. You know that versions of that? That just got to scare you all. There's the amount of plutonium it takes to kill all life forms on the planet. I'm talking right down to viruses. Is about the size of a baseball, and there's about a basketball's worth of it missing from various Russian reactors and stuff like that. Now that's got to, that's kind of scary. We're not talking about just a little thing like global warming. That's nothing. That's a day. As far as I'm concerned, global warming, all that's doing is making Denver a better place to live. And I don't, I'm going back to fluorocarbons in my deodorant just to help that one along. But plutonium, that's the blast for, that's got a half-life of a gazillion years. So, I mean, that's got to be kind of scary. If you don't get that part of just the sort of disaster things that can happen, then you get the things that legally can happen. And when I was doing the many faces of terrorism and running the scenarios for there being the first world federation that really was healthy green and really did institute a one-person, one-vote electronic democracy, I became convinced not only that it was certainly possible, but that it very, very well could be likely to some degree. It's truly spooky times. So I don't know. It's the whole thing is one that you just really want to make sure you stay grounded in suchness, in the reality of one taste, and the other is indeed practice, and practice, and practice, and make sure that it's a center of gravity that you can maintain. And then by example, let your presence be something that other individuals look at and go, I would like to be like that. And if that's not the response that many of your friends have, well, that's not helping. And if you're really repulsive, you probably become an activist. You know what I mean. And on the other hand, how many, there's all sides of the streets. There's a lot of really well-intentioned, long-term spiritual practitioners and teachers are not somebody you'd want to emulate, are they? So it goes for all of us. And this is not being judgmental in the bad sense. It's truly, we have to be our own heroes and our own heroines. And that's just a really good place to start. A lot of you who are parents, you already know what that means, don't you? You just so want that your young son or daughter looks up to you. I've got 2 dogs, I'm hoping come along with that. And those are the little things that being human is made of, isn't it? So let your own presence be something that convinces the world.